So this is part 2. Up in Blenheim, I told you that some madness went on up there. I want to share one story with you. And just in limited detail, we went up there to try and bust into the industry to do a buy. I had almost as much cash as what I paid for a house in a bag, and the guys that got us up there set us up to rip us off. We were in the Cobb & Co, and I've always had a sense of discernment, and I said to the other guys, hey, we're getting set up here. And we looked around the bar, and there was big guys around the bar. We tried to go out through the accommodation, and they had the mongrel mob staked out the front of the building. And I said to Watty and our driver, we're in a bit of trouble here. We're sitting in a restaurant and a bar. We've put the shotgun together in a sports bag under the table. I told you I was insane. I had a huge big hunting knife in my pocket. I took all the cash out and stashed it on my body, and I said to Watty, you need to carry the bag, and if it goes bad, just pull the trigger. Into the roof first and then into somebody, because we had to get this cash out of there. I would borrow money off some pretty nasty people, and you didn't want to lose the money, and so I just said to our driver, go to the toilet, they're not worried about you. Go to the toilet, and if you have to break the windows, get out, get in your car. When we see it go past, drive into the car park. We'll come running out and we'll dive into the car. I'm looking around the bar at all these guys that are involved in staking us out and thinking, chances of getting out of here is not good without shooting someone. And even then, it was not looking good. And Chriso drove past the window, and we said, right, count 10. And we're just sitting there. On the count of 10, I said to Watty, go. We just leapt up and started running, and it was like a movie. The thing stepped in. There was no way for us to escape that place. And one of the guys was standing at the bar, this big dude, and as he saw us go to move, he leapt forward. He knocked a jug of beer out of a guy's hand. The guy goes, hey, mate. And he just pushed him. The guy punched him. Because of the tension in the bar, it was like a Western movie. The whole bar just erupted into a brawl. Everybody started punching these guys who were staking us out. And we ran through the middle of the dance floor, knocked a whole lot of people over, jumped in the car, screamed off out of the car park, and we're just going down the road, and when what happened there? And I said to Watty, that thing happened again. That's the thing. But because I was so insane, we didn't take that as a get out of jail card. I got Chris to stop at a rest area, dug a hole, buried the money, and went back in. And to show people that didn't happen. I ended up on my own in the motorcycle gang headquarters that night, and we'll leave it at that. I was insane. I was a psychopathic lunatic. Then in 1982, and I can't tell you this is the whole story, you need to go and see miracle after miracle after miracle, 24 hours of violence, immorality. I ended up at a Divine Light mission meeting by miracle after miracle after miracle. And I was in the meeting thinking, what am I doing here? Went up to watch Canterbury win the Ranfurly Shield, and there was two people sitting in the front seat, and I went and sat in the seat to follow the thing. You need to go and watch it online. It's an amazing story. And behind me there was a picture. I went and sat in this throne that you weren't supposed to sit in unless you met the Guru. There's a picture of him, a 12-foot picture of the Guru Maharajai. It was a Divine Light mission thing. And I was sitting in that seat, and when I went and sat, I said to Rob, he was a small-time drug dealer that I knew, he ended up getting me there, and I said, can I sit in a seat? And he goes, what? And I said, can I go up there? And I just felt this compulsion. Something was pushing me to go and sit in the seat. He told me later that only people can sit in that seat have been to Los Angeles to see the Master, and he said, oh yeah, okay, he didn't know whether they were going to kill me. So I went and sat in the seat, and I sat down, thought, what am I doing? I suddenly realised by looking at the congregation that it wasn't the right thing to do. People were really angry, some got up and left. And then the thing did its thing. Do you know what I said? And if you had, in the longer version, I tell you what I'd done in the previous 24 hours. And I just pointed to this guy and I said, there's no salvation in this man, there's only salvation in Jesus Christ. What did I say that for? And the people in the front started to ask me questions, and I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know how I was doing it. I was quoting the Bible. They were asking me questions, and I was quoting scripture to them. And I'm sitting there, it was it was the most surreal thing in my life. This is the biggest thing that thing ever did. I was able to present the gospel to these people. Every time they asked a question, I'm quoting the Bible thinking, how do I know this stuff? How do I know this stuff? And then these people, I believe they'll be in the kingdom. I was an animal and I led 2 people to Jesus. That saddened me because what God knew, there was a couple of people in this crazy divine light mission thing. They were looking for truth. Here's a guy, when I say guy, probably 30% guy, 70% animal, that happened to be stranded because he wanted to hook up with the cheerleader again, and he didn't go back to Christchurch, so he grabs me out of the bar by a miracle, takes me there, and he just downloaded what I'd read it as a child. I didn't know what was happening at the time. I sat down next to Rob and he goes, man, I didn't know you're a Christian. I said, neither did I. Don't know what that was all about. And then in the middle of all of that madness, I climbed to the top of the heap. The syndicate said that they were having nothing to do with gangs anymore. I had sole rights to all of the business for the bottom of the South Island, North Island and all of the South Island. Back in the day, that was worth $1.4 million, which is insane. You couldn't buy a house in New Zealand for $1.4 million. And I heard a voice. Didn't say leave Sodom now, but that's what I'm putting it as. I heard a voice, an audible voice, say to me, this is your last chance for salvation. It was so clear. Spoke audibly and to my heart at the same time. And I just went, whoa. And I just knew that I had to move on that. I rang the head of the syndicate, said, I'm out. And he said, what are you talking about, man? I said, I think God spoke to me. He said, why are you doing that? And I said, I think God spoke to me. He said, you're smoking too much weed. I said, no, I know I have to get out. He came down, bought 8 pounds of marijuana, got me to flick that on. I said, I'm not doing it. But I did it, the last deal. And I just rang a couple of people and moved it for him. And then I just said, I'm done. I didn't know whether they'd shoot me, what they'd do. And he was in tears because he said, I thought I'd found a friend. Because you're so isolated in that world, it was just him and I, and we could just sit and talk about real stuff that I couldn't talk about with anybody else. God said, get out now. That man, all of his sergeants, everybody below him went to jail. All the dealers that I was supplying went to jail. I just stopped. I said, I'm done from today. We sold our house. Somebody came in and bought our house from under us. We moved to a school teacher's house, then moved to my mum's house, then bought a house out in the country. The police didn't know where I was. First guy I ever tried to share the gospel with was an undercover cop. He was my dearest friend. He was an undercover cop on the Mr. Asia drug syndicate. And I tried to share the gospel with him, and I asked him one day, I said, now, Smarty, what do you know about me that I didn't tell you? And he said, you got out in the nick of time. I had no idea. I thought I was so bulletproof. I had 3 cops 24 hours a day. They had 8-hour sessions watching my house. They had my phone tapped. They knew everything I was doing, and at just the right moment, I stopped, and they couldn't pin anything on me. This is a picture of a day's salmon fishing down in the South Island. You call this the promised land? And that little fish there was caught by one of those 3 police officers that were on my case. Stuart, he perfed out of the police force. He used to watch my house 8 hours a day, and I've been hunting and fishing with him. And I joked because I said to him, when he caught that little trout, we all caught the salmon, I said, you're no good at catching criminals, you're no good at catching fish either. But in those days we could joke. But then I went to a Christian meeting, as I shared at the message last night. I went to a Christian meeting that was dealing with health, thinking this guy will know nothing. He's a Christian. Christians know nothing about health. And when I went there, I realised he learned a lot. And I still quote verbatim some of what that guy spoke at that meeting that day. It was a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. And he showed me that after 10 years of studying health, all I needed to do was read 29 verses into this Bible. And I thought, what an idiot. 10 years to study the perfect diet. I could have opened this book, gone 29 verses in. What does that take? A minute and a half, if that, a minute? I could have found out everything that I'd learnt in 10 years of study. And then I read the book, Counsels on Diets and Foods. I read the book, Ministry of Healing, and it pointed me to the Bible. And so I wanted to learn more about what the Bible taught. I also wanted to read books by this same author. And I read a lot of them. While I was in the middle of all that lifestyle I was telling you about, I was reading these books. And I knew that this person was a prophet. My mates at the pub would be talking about Nostradamus, and I said, forget that, I'll tell you about a real prophet. And I read 2 books about the author. I'd read lots of the books that she'd written, and I was telling people about it. This is a true prophet, until one guy in a pub one day said to me, just like the man at the railways, he said, so what good's it doing you, brother? Oh, that's a point. Spouting all this religious stuff. And I read a book called Desire of Ages. When I read that book, I had 2 amazing experiences. I was reading in page 380, A Night on the Lake, and it talks about, in storm and darkness, the sea had taught them their own helplessness, and they longed for the presence of their master. It says, Jesus, the watcher on the shore, had not forgotten him. Jesus saw those fear-stricken men battling with the tempest. Not for a moment did he lose sight of his disciples, because these men were to be the light of the world. I read that. I was an animal. I read that, and it was like I got a shock. It was as if it was saying, that's you. And I went, no, don't be ridiculous. What do you mean? How can that be me? I just felt that it was personally speaking to me. I got to the end of the book, page 809, where 7 of the disciples gathered to meet Jesus by the Sea of Galilee. And the text says 7 of the disciples were in company. They were clad in the humble garb of fishermen. They were poor in worldly goods, but rich in the knowledge and practice of the truth, which in the sight of heaven gave them the highest rank as teachers. They'd not been students in the schools of the prophets, but for 3 years they'd been taught by the greatest educator this world has ever seen. Under his instruction, they'd become elevated, intelligent, and refined, agents through whom men might be led to a knowledge of the truth. And I got that same electric shock, as if God was saying, that's you, son, don't be ridiculous. I just knew that those 2 statements in that book were calling to my heart. And if you'd have seen me, you would have thought, this guy could never be on Jesus' team. But he was calling me to be the light of the world and lead me into the knowledge of God. It was such a tumultuous journey, reading God's word, reading God's books, and doing the devil's will. I was just being buffeted from side to side. Had a big drug auction one day. My wife was at a camp meeting, and I picked up this book called The Great Controversy. I started reading that book, and I was just enamored. I was captivated by the stories of the martyrs, the reformers. Why would they just give their lives up when all they had to do was kiss a cross or just say a simple statement? Why would you die? And I couldn't put the book down. 3 days I read it. I don't even know whether I was eating. There's this book here. And as I got through it, I had the same realization that Alexander Solzhenitsyn did. That the line between good and evil, I knew who was right in religion, I knew who was wrong. I knew about a lot of stuff. But what I needed to learn was that the line went through my heart. I was either voting for Jesus or the enemy. And at that point, I realized that Jesus died for me. It was personal. Unbelievable. And I don't recommend this, Greg, but 4 days after my last can of beer and joint, they baptised me at a camp meeting. But the pastor there, I said to him, I want to get baptised in the future sometime. I'd done studies with 5 pastors by this time. Sadly, I'd go to church meetings and I realised I knew more about what the church believed than the people at the church. And if they did know what they believed, they weren't practising it. So it wasn't doing me any good going to church. But I knew, but I didn't know Jesus, and he realised that I'd met Jesus. I was baptised. And then I started reading the scripture with new eyes. I came to John 14:26. But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance whatsoever I've said to you. I just burst into tears because it was like God has said to me, that's what I did in Wellington. I read the portion about the scales being put over their eyes. God said, that's what I did for you when the police were in your house. The story of Lot. I burst into tears. I read the story of the Isaiah 55. My word shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please. And God showed me that what I'd hidden in my heart as a child, He was able to bring that out again. Psalm 91, He'll give His angels charge over you. They'll bear you up in your hands lest you dash your foot against a stone. I read that, burst into tears. God said, that's what I did to your car. An angel saved you. And I suddenly realised that the unidentified thing that was working in my life wasn't just anything. It wasn't karma. It was the God of the Bible. It was the living God, the Creator. So then it was Satan's move. I've got a picture on the screen of the day that I left the freezing works to start my business. One of the guys had a bit too much to drink and he rode his motorcycle through the bar and smashed the doors on the way out. Why am I telling you about him? Because just after I'd given my heart to Jesus, I was lying in my bed at night and I got woken up, and I wasn't dreaming, I fully was awake, and this guy that's riding the motorbike was standing in my room. He was an acquaintance at the very best. He wasn't a friend, and I couldn't work out how he knew where I lived. I'm just looking at him going, not what are you doing in my bedroom at 2 o'clock in the morning, but how do you know where I live? And Jim is this guy's name. And I was just about to say, what are you doing, Jim? And I saw his eyes. Anybody that's seen a demon will know exactly what I'm talking about. Where the eyes should be, it's just red, bright red. And I suddenly went, why it chose this guy's form, I don't know. He leapt on me and started strangling me. And I thought I was dying. I was trying to wake my wife up. I don't know what she's going to do. I sort of knew a bit about handling myself, and I'm trying to get my wife to save me from a demon. But I suddenly realised that somehow I needed to try and call out Jesus' name. I was being physically attacked by a being that was as real as any of you. And I managed to call out Jesus' name and he vanished, and I woke Kerry and I said, oh, you're not going to believe what happened. And she got, because she was quite further down the tunnel in some ways than I, she got thrown around the room. A demon held her by her nightie and threw her right around the room, dragged her downstairs and everything. So I made a commitment to God. I'd been a Christian for a while, and I realised that my testimony is not what I used to do. Everybody wanted to know. Everybody wanted to film me. Everybody wanted to hear my story. I said, I don't want to talk about that stuff. But I wasn't doing anything for God. I was attending church. I was learning a lot. And I made a promise. I got on my knees and I said, God, I'm going to make you 2 promises. I'm going to start memorising the Bible, and I'll have that done by the time I'm 305. And I said, I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do. You ask me to do something, I'm going to do it, no matter what it is. But I'm never going to ask to do something. And I'm here because Greg asked me. And I just started sharing my faith with people. We were in a Bible study, and there was a pastor, an American pastor, who was in South New Zealand, and he was to run the week of worship for the kids, and he was so sick. He came to our Bible study group, our home group, and he could hardly move. He said, I shouldn't have come. He's just lying on a beanbag. He said, can you guys pray for me? And I prayed. We got in a group and we prayed. And as I was praying for him, I felt something happen. And the lady sitting in the middle of that picture there, she didn't have her eyes closed. And as soon as we finished praying, I just backed out of the thing. I thought, man, I don't know what's happened here. And the American pastor started crying. And he said, Gordon, I've been healed. She saw a blue flash of light. And just as our group prayed for him, she saw a blue flash of light. His illness was taken away. There wasn't a semblance of it. It was instantly taken away. I went to a baptism. The guy, the second from the left at the back, I went to his baptism. He was part of our home group. At the baptism, the pastor that was baptising him, he's not in that photograph there, he said, if anybody would like to be baptised, he named the 3 pastors in the room. He said, just come and ask one of these guys. And he said, and Gordon Gosset as well. I'd never been in that church before in my life. I hardly knew anyone there. I went to a baptism and he spoke my name out. 2 people came and asked me to baptise them. And I asked him later, I know this man, he's a friend, he's an Australian. And I said to him, why did you do that? And he said, I would never have said that. I would never have done that. And I said, you did. And he spoke without knowing why he was speaking. And so The girl, this one here, two along from my wife, she was the one that asked to be baptised. I had the privilege of doing the first lay baptism in South New Zealand. They didn't allow lay people to baptise, but they allowed me to baptise her. And that started a journey. That group of people, you might see, it's hard to look at that, one of my dearest friends, Dr. Hans Deal, is in that picture. We started a group called River at 4. It was a ministry. And we started CHIP in New Zealand, and we started Depression and Anxiety Recovery Program in New Zealand. We were running a lay ministry, and we ran our own health program till we found out about CHIP. It was called Health to Go. We were leading souls to Jesus. And we had an amazing ministry. They put me on the front of the Record magazine and also the front of the signs and on Seventh-day Adventist television because they were amazed with what we were doing. And if you read that old copy of the Record or watch it on TV, you'll hear what I said. I said, I'm not doing nothing. I'm not doing anything, sorry. These guys, our team, the team of 8, or the other 7, they were doing everything. I said, I'm just the big mouth up the front. I'm doing the speaking. These guys were doing all the work. We brought 2 to 4 international speakers over each year. God blessed our ministry abundantly. And last year we were running that ministry. The president told me that I baptised more people than all the pastors in our conference. I was running a contracting business. And in my contracting business, here's my 2 twins working for me. I need to tell you a couple of miracle stories. First, I was coming home one night and my wife had said that somebody was babysitting. She had to be out by 7 o'clock. I was coming home out to the country where we lived. And as I'm driving, I now knew the thing's voice. I knew when God was speaking to me. I'm driving home. I was only going to get there just in time for this lady to get away and go to her babysitting appointment. And if anybody knows Jeremy Dixon, it was his mother-in-law. And I was driving there and God said, you need to go to your pit. I had a big yard out in the country where we stored a lot of products, a lot of logs and power poles and things. And I got this message, go there. And I thought, that'd be ridiculous. And it was so strong. And I decided to turn and I went. And I thought, this is going to cause so much. If I go there, I'm going to be late and Kira will be upset. The poor lady's going to miss her appointment. I get there to find that somebody had cut the gate and they were stealing product. And I did a bit of research, found out it was some young guys up the road and got the local police officer. He came down and at the end of it, he said, do you want to press charges? I said, no, they can just take it all back. And I said, we don't press charges if you take this book. And I gave them a copy of Great Controversy. And I said, you can go to court or you can read this book. What do you want to do? And the police officer, he used to try and chase me around. He said, and on the way back from there, he said, man, you're not who you used to be. He said, I know who you used to be. And he said, you wouldn't have rung us. You would have dealt with that yourself. And they would have been calling us on you. And I said, well, that's not what Jesus wants us to do. So I was able to witness to the police officer as well. I was working on I just wanted to give this story to tell you, don't argue with God. We used to do a lot of tree work and we'd get all the stuff that nobody else would want to do, the dangerous stuff. I could have showed you some videos, but I don't have time. And so I was working on the second steepest hill I'd ever worked on. Massive wattle trees. And I was felling them. They'd hit the deck and they'd slide down and then my guys would come roaring up and skid them out onto the flat ground. I was cutting this tree and it was really hard to stay next to it. I'm cutting it and I heard God say to me, get above the tree. I said, what? I knew the thing, God's voice was speaking to me, so I stepped out, looked up to see nothing was going to fall down, walked a long way away and checked it out. The guys in the paddock are all watching going, what's he doing? So I went back and I'm looking at it and there's nothing wrong with this tree. And then I went to cut it and I got this voice, get above the tree. So I obeyed. I went round onto the right-hand side and trying to maintain my balance and cut this tree on this super steep hill was really difficult. So I went back round where I'd been and I said, what's wrong? And it said, get above the tree. So I looked and I said, God, I know what I'm doing. What a stupid thing to say. I know what I'm doing. So I looked at the tree and I said, are you talking about shake? Because wattle trees get shake, they split. I had a friend killed by a tree with shake. So I said, no, I'm onto that, I'm watching. And anyway, in the end, I just said to God, it's too dangerous the other way, I'm going to do it this way. I was arguing with the voice. And then as I came through the back cut, it went bang, and it split in half. Exactly what I thought might happen. But I was ready for it. Oh, okay, that's all right. But as it went like that, the tree shook, and the bank next to me just started to open up like something out of a horror movie. The tree had one big long root, went all the way along the bank. When it shook, it ripped out of the bank, hit me in the shoulder. Because I'd been warned by God, I was waiting for something to happen. I took off, I ran, and I dived down the hill over tree stumps and branches, just like I was diving into water. I only just got away as this tree root, about 12-foot tree root, just slid down and took everything in the way with it and all that. Right, if I'd have been above that tree, that would have just all happened. But I wasn't listening, and I thought, forgive me, God, for not arguing. My twins were working that day down the bottom with some other guys, and they said, man, that was the fastest we've ever seen you go, Dad. But you went twice as fast back to see that your chainsaw was all right. But then the Seventh-day Adventist Church approached me from that ministry to come and be a pastor. And that opened many doors for me. I'm indebted to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. They paid for my education. They flew me over to Australia for 8 years. And we got a Weet-Bix packet degree, an associate degree. And you might recognise some of the people in that picture. Bruce Mason from down south, and Westy's in there, Karma, there's a few, Mike Falzerano. So we did it. Our class was officially called the class from hell by the lecturers, apparently. That's what they told us. But I met some good guys, and it opened up doors for me. And yeah, just the journey walking with Jesus is within the church has been a wonderful experience, being able to do what I used to do. I used to do up to 40 hours a week for Jesus and run my business. We walked away from our business. The church employed me. Now I do what I used to do, and they pay me to do it. So it's the best job in the world. And that's I've met a lot of people within the church. It's led me to places like Ghana. This is a series that I ran in Ghana, and that series in Ghana is where my book came out of. I've been able to write a book by God's grace. Most of the people that you see on First Light TV, the international speakers, I'm friends with them, I know them. God just somehow connected me with them from little old South New Zealand, and I just want to stay in South New Zealand, but I've got connection with these guys. I'll just take you to a story. I just want to show you that God still works miracles. Last year, at the end of last year, I was in Blenheim in the top of the South Island, and I got a contact through Hope TV. They would get people that would get books, The Desire of Ages. I rang this lady, and her name is Tina. And I said to Tina, yeah, you've enjoyed the book. Would you like me to come and visit? And she said, oh, absolutely. She told me about her grandson. She got a grandson called Ollie. He's 7 years of age. He lives in a home where he's not allowed to mention the name of Jesus or God. His mother is completely anti. But this little boy at 7 loves the Lord. All I could think of was me. And she said, when he's at her home, he just loves to read the Bible. But he's got a kid's sort of a Bible. And he said for his birthday, for his 8th birthday, the only thing he wanted was a real Bible. She said, can you get us one? And I said, absolutely. She said, I want it to be a kid's Bible with pictures, but he wants the whole Bible, not just stories. I went to a Christian bookstore in Rangiora and picked up a beautiful Bible for him. And we went to go and visit her this night. And she had told me where she lived, and I said, well, text me your address. Just text me the address and we'll go there, Kerry and I. We went to the address, and I went to visit a pastor up there. Then went to go to the address. I opened my phone, clicked on her number, and I had no text and I had no address. All I knew is that she lived in this part of town. There's 2 main thoroughfares in there, and I just thought I knew where she lived, and I said to Kerry, the road name's got Fern in it. It's Fern Hill or Red Fern or something. There's a Fern in the name. So we drove into this subdivision, hundreds and hundreds of houses, driving around. Couldn't find a road, so I just stopped and asked Siri, right, phone, is there any streets here called Red Fern? Looked at the whole map, there was nothing in there with Fern in the name. And I was impressed, I was in the wrong main thoroughfare. So I went over to the next arterial route that goes into this huge subdivision and drove up the the street, looked around, no streets in there that meant anything. I said, I think it's number 5. And so we drove round and there was nothing. Kerry's saying, look, we've got to go out to these people's place for dinner. We'll just have to leave. And I said, no, God, you need to direct us there. I said, you need to direct us there. And so we drove and I saw a street called Rata Street. And Rata Street had some personal connection with our family. And so I just said, I'll just go down there. We went to number 5. It was just a shed. I thought, well, this isn't the place. And Kerry said, well, she's praying. She's just got to head down. She's praying, Lord, direct us, please, to this lady. And I was praying. And I pulled out, and instead of driving back to the arterial route, I was impressed to go left. And I went down the street. It's the craziest street I've ever been down. It's got lanes everywhere, and numbers they're not consecutive numbers. They're not sequential. It's just all over the place. If she'd given us the address, we probably wouldn't have found it. We're driving down this road. Kerry says, where are you going? And I said, I don't know. I think I should drive down this road. We're talking scores of roads, hundreds and hundreds of houses. And I kept down towards the end and I saw a lane. And I was impressed to turn down the lane. And I drove down the lane. And I said, Lord, where do you want me to go? And we turned and went left into a drive. I pulled up a driveway. There was a house at the back whose driveway we're in. There was a house right next to us. There was no fences, so I thought, I'll go to the first house. And I just went to the house and I said knocked on the door, this guy goes, what do you want? I said, oh, sorry, mate, we're just looking for Tina. And I said her surname. Oh, she doesn't live here, that's her house there. We were in her drive. Is God good? The thing still works. There was just hundreds and hundreds of houses. We were in her drive. Hallelujah. And I just want to tell you that when you walk with the Lord, your testimony is a way, way more important testimony than when you're in darkness. Remember what Alexander Solzhenitsyn says? This line shifts inside us, it oscillates with the years and even within hearts. Overwhelmed by evil, my heart was overwhelmed by evil. One small bridgehead of good is retained. God's Spirit didn't let go of me. But it also says, and even in the best of all hearts there remains an uprooted small corner of evil. And I want to tell you, friends, I'm only one step away from being that guy again. Without Jesus, I'm Adolf Hitler. And so are you. We need to keep walking with Jesus, keep walking with the Lord. And daily, it would be well for us to spend a thoughtful hour each day in contemplation of the life of Christ. As we should take it point by point and let the imagination grasp each scene, especially the closing ones. As we thus dwell on His great sacrifice for us, our confidence in Him will be more constant, our love will be quickened, and we shall be more deeply imbued with the Spirit. If we would be saved at last, we must learn the lesson of penitence and humiliation at the foot of the cross. And this has become a mantra for me. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross, despising it the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider Him that endured such contradiction of sinners against Himself, lest you be wearied and faint in your minds. We need to keep looking unto Jesus, friends, and have a testimony. Not what you did, but what you're doing. What are you doing for the Lord today? Can I share one more poem with you before I go? From the houses of finery and palaces, the eager people came to the grand old theatre venue to hear the orator of great fame, whose voluble and vivid renditions would awaken one's deepest fears, but when softened back to dulcet tones would caress the listening ears. The audience sat in rapt delight, and their appreciation would turn to wonder, as the speaker's voice on acoustic wings would crash in like the rolling of thunder, then quickly subside to audibly reflect the still of the evening calm. It was one of these moments the Master chose to read the 23rd Psalm. With all his education, skill and eloquence, he awed all with his vocal display. None had ever heard those words spoken with the precision they were that day. And when the orator finished speaking, he bowed, and all gave vent to their adulation. A cacophony of clapping soon gave way to a unanimous standing ovation. When an old man with a vigour years of toil could not assuage, and the help of his stick stepped onto the stage. Silence fell like a blanket, ending the applause that had been so loud. Placing his hand on the orator's shoulder, he said, "Sir, may I please address your crowd?" Somewhat taken aback by the request, yet impressed with the man's humble bearing, he said with his usual flair, let us hear what you wish to be sharing." "The Lord's my shepherd," he began as he recited the psalm from his head. And the audience, by now all seated, felt a power attend each word he said. And when he finished speaking, there was silence, but not a dry eye in the place. And the orator, quite visibly moved, stepped up with a solemn look on his face. Taking the old minister's arm, he said, "Sir, there is something I wish to know. How is it that without any training you've quite literally stolen my show? For I've been trained in the best schools of Europe to take a crowd's emotions and cause them to sway. But never have I seen them so moved as what you have done here this day." With a fatherly look, he said, "Sir, you know the psalm, each syllable from beginning to end. The difference is that I know the shepherd. In fact, he's my dearest friend." Friends, make Jesus your best friend.